Good day, everyone. This is Tulio Suragusa with Tech Backstage, and today we're having a design thinking focused conversation. My guest is Neil Cross, who's at Peppermint Innovation. Hi, Neil. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm currently it's an island, so I'm on Santorini in the Greek islands on my honeymoon. And I
Oh,
thought, hey, you reached out, and I thought, right, let's get on a chat and then see where we go.
amazing. Now, you're either super committed to the idea of design thinking that you're chiming in from Santorini on your honeymoon, or you just you miss the business world so much. But in any case, it's good to have you with us.
Yeah,
We're,
thank you.
we're talking today about embedding design thinking at the world's best bank, and that it's not just about getting the tools and workshops in place. So, Neil is a practitioner of design thinking, so this should make a really good, interesting conversation. Before we dive into our questions and see what we can learn and unpack today, let's get to know you a little bit. We already know you're on your honeymoon. You're in Santorini. Congratulations,
That's
by the
right.
way.
Thank you.
Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about you and your background and how you got to Peppermint. If you could please let us know. Thanks for being with us again.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. To calm your listeners, I'm on honeymoon for 4 weeks, and so I do have a lot of time to come and have a chat. So I'm Neil Cross. I've done a lot of things in my career. I worked at Microsoft. I was a games developer first up, and then spent 7 years at Microsoft, and then joined MasterCard for a couple of years to run their innovation labs in Asia, Middle East, and Africa, and then joined DBS Bank as the Chief Innovation Officer globally for about 5 years, and now back to the startup world. I'm currently working at Peppermint as a board member, and we're doing mobile money out in the Philippines, so helping people get into the right product and help financially educate them and achieve some of the things they're trying to achieve in their life, through different payment and lending and insurance products. So that's a bit about me. Done a lot of design thinking. Well, maybe not as much as some of the listeners, but quite a lot of journeys in my time across customer and also employees.
Excellent. Thanks for being with us. Tell us a bit about Peppermint Innovation.
So we're quite a small ASX listed business here, and have about 60,000 agents in the Philippines. And the idea is, if you don't have a bank account and you want to pay things like the electric bill or send people money or get loans at very competitive rates, or micro insurance to protect the people and the things you love, then you can go to one of our agents. And the agents, like a little sari store. So in the Philippines, it's like a very small shop or a kind of roadside affair, and you can perform a finance transaction. So that's what we do at Peppermint. Before that, working at Pitcher Wealth, co-founder of Pitcher Wealth, doing financial advice in Australia. So really with Peppermint, obviously what we're trying to do in the developing markets is to accelerate the change by enabling people to, for me, it's the core of design thinking. So enabling people in the jobs they need to do. And so we think a lot about that in design thinking, and obviously we think a lot about that in helping them with their finance jobs.
Great. I love it. Let's see what we can learn today. We're going to unpack as much as we can, go through a few questions to see how you guys identify what the needs of those people are and how you apply tools to develop solutions for them and validate them and test them, and then ultimately get to solving the problem that you're solving. So let's get started with question number one. How do you guys engage people to gain a deeper understanding of problems you're solving to drive innovation opportunities? So how do you guys go about engaging people? What is it that you guys do? Do you have any tools or methodologies that's worked for you? We'd love to understand, as a first step, how you're understanding the problem you're solving.
Okay. So we can take this road in two ways. So let me start with the more traditional answer, which is that we spend time with customers. We do a discovery. We understand the jobs to be done. We understand journeys. And then we can also, at the same time, we can do some more quantitative analysis on the markets and etc. And that's what we tend to do in the world of design thinking. But I like to operate at, you can also operate at a slightly higher level and think about who really are the stakeholders. And this is a lot of the struggle I get brought in to help companies is actually take another level above. So who are the humans that you're trying to solve the problems for? So we tend to very much focus on the customer, and that's absolutely right. Yeah. At the same time, we tend to, unless we're a DOA company or a Web 3.0 company, we tend to have staff. So we've got staff doing stuff, and there's some tech in between with customers and generating a business model. But at the same time, we tend to forget that we also have shareholders, and they need a return. And we've got stakeholders like regulators, for example, at the same time. And we're trying to kind of please all of these people, really, when you're using design thinking, especially in delivering, a particularly new or groundbreaking innovation. And so I like to kind of just pull up a level. And also you've got business leaders. So you've got to juggle people, the money, people financing the project. You've got the people selling the product inside the organization. You've got the customers, you've got the partners. And all of these are personas and they all have journeys. And so, as I said, at a base level, spend time making friends and collecting stories. But think about the broader kind of stakeholder map in what you're trying to achieve. If you're doing something particularly ambitious or particularly large or well-funded.
Interesting. So let's move on to the next question, because I think it's very appropriate. You mentioned all the various stakeholders, and that's a pretty broad set of people. At the end of the day, it's all about people. So the next question is, what challenges have you had to overcome to increase collaboration amongst employees, and what impact has that had on innovation? What I mean by that is you have different departments in an organization focus on their key objectives, right? So the customer care team has a set of objectives, the investor relations team has a set of objectives, yet the stakeholders are broad. So how do you get them to collaborate in such a way that it's about the people, not the departments, which is something a lot of companies challenged with today? If you can share a little bit of best practices there.
Yeah. I'll go in. I'll even drop that down a level. So I went up a level in the last one. I'll drop it down to egos and individual people. Mm-hmm. And really that is the biggest challenge, is that generally historically the executive team, and maybe in companies you may work for, but these executives have a certain amount of, hey, I know what's best. Yeah, I have been doing this job for decades. I know my customer, I know my product, I know my industry. And that's the toughest thing, especially in large organizations. Actually, in large, you've got, when I worked at a large bank, 30,000 staff, biggest company in Southeast Asia, DBS Bank, it was very much the individual executive team, about 200 people, which I was part of as a managing director. And it's really a sales job to make them the hero. And so a lot of innovation efforts, whether innovation labs, design thinking, experimentation, startup engagement, hackathons, whatever, get run as like a separate process. And then you try and kind of shove it into your company and hope for some level of success, which I did, early in my career. So, everything I've learned is because I've probably done it wrong in the past. But the art with the thing is to break down that ego. And the thing I found which works incredibly well is get senior people, get them inventing stuff and get them using lean startup. Yeah, get them doing a lean startup loop. Get them doing a paper prototype. DBS Bank would get 200 executives into a room. We'd split them up into teams. We'd pair them with startup companies, and get them building a solution to a real business problem. So then we got the different heads of the business, like consumer bank, mortgages, corporate lending, and go into the more service orientated, like operations teams, risk, credit, finance, for example, for the kind of staff journeys, and get them to invent. So get the seniors to invent, and then get them out in the street, either in the street if they're customer focused, in the bank if they're employee focused, or out to their corporate clients, and get them to fail. That's the best thing. We used to get them building prototypes, and I knew their ideas sucked. I knew their ideas, and they say to me, "Hey Neil, what do you think about this idea in a hackathon?" I go, "Oh, yeah, I love it. It's brilliant." And knowing that we've got taxis waiting for these executives to go to a shopping market to test their new credit card, and I know the customers are going to say, "I mean, this is awful." And so they go out with this taxi, and they come back 2 hours later, their faces all like this, and I'm like, "Oh, what happened?" And they said, "Well, well, it went well, but the customers had some feedback." And I'm like, "Oh, that's terrible. I really liked your idea, but I suppose the customers, you have to listen to them and stuff." And so that for us was a huge kind of hammer to break that ego bubble that many of the executives had, that then they would be open to a conversation around the fact that maybe they don't know best anymore. And then we can then dig into doing customer insight research, follow shoppers around malls, work a week. We had people working for a week in small businesses, in restaurants and other places and startup companies, to really understand how they think about money and finance and how they want to work with the bank.
I love it. This touches, you already touched on question number 3 quite a bit in terms of, but I'm curious to go a little deeper on so what I've heard is get the senior folks down from the ivory tower and out in front of people, like really have them go test and validate their ideas to see if there's actually any merit with them. So in question number 3, how do you go about synthesizing all the various learning to eventually inform the right prototype that needs to be put in place to solve the actual problem that needs to be solved? So I've heard you send people out, you get them to engage, they collect information, and then how do you go about synthesizing? Because you'll still have a bunch of different opinions, right? So how do you go about synthesizing that in a way to inform what the prototype should look like to solve the real problem?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of feeders into that process. If you're taking, for example, at DBS, we have this very formulated structure where we're running all that they tend to follow, and have someone from the innovation group, one of my team, giving them different levels of support so they can achieve a certain level of capability and outcome from that process. But ultimately, the selection needs to be. You've got the standard stuff, yeah. I mean, let's go the kind of low road. Not low road, but normal road, where you've got kind of, is it feasible? Is it viable? Is it desirable? Yeah. So is it feasible? Can we actually do it? Is the technology available? Do we have the money for the investment? Is it viable? Is it going to make money, essentially? And is it desirable? Which is, fairness should be the first thing. But anyway, do customers want it? Whether those are business customers, whether they're partners, whether they're shareholders, whatever your persona that you've decided to kind of innovate around. And that should be, the selection should always be, for me, especially in customer facing, is that iterative loop of just getting stuff in front of your personas, yeah. And start on paper, get it cheap, do a few iterations on paper, cost you like, 25 cents, and then start building the maturity in the kind of visualization of that innovation or problem you're trying to solve, or journey or improvement, or whatever you're trying to achieve with that. And so it's like when you sharpen a knife, you get a sharpening stone. You got your knife, you got something. The customer should be the sharpening stone. You should be getting your knife and just constantly get it shaped by the client. But then that's a beautiful nirvana.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. But what you've got to try and do is retain as much as you can of that, and then you've got all this other politics happening, which then you need to balance as well. So it's very much the customer, what do they want, but then it's also the business, the politics, the regulators, the people funding the project.
I love it. This brings us to the next question number 4. What I've heard so far is it's nice to learn what the customers want to get the underlying desire, but then you also have to triangulate that with, is it something you're capable of delivering on? Is it something worthwhile delivering on? So those are really tough questions that requires a lot of honesty internally. So, but once you kind of understand, let's say the stars align and you've got an understanding of, yes, there's value in creating it. We have a way to do it. We have the willingness to do it, and it's a desired result from the client. How do you go about building the prototypes themselves? Like, what's the process for going to build out the prototypes you're going to actually go and validate now, where the rubber meets the road? You guys follow a particular process for that?
Yeah, I've used many different processes recently at Peppermint. I just did it in Excel. I've been brought in as a non-exec director. I've been there about 3 months now. It's a wonderful business doing mobile money in the Philippines. And one of the first things I looked at is I asked them to put, collate all the shots of their current apps, and then just create an Excel sheet. And each column in the Excel was a step in the journey, and I had, what's the process, obviously the screenshot process, what they're doing, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and then just do a basic customer journey map, and then discuss with the CEO and the tech team and the head of product and the head of marketing on how we optimize that. And at the startup level, you have a different challenge there. So at the startup level, you really have, whereas I talked a lot about corporate and ego, at a startup level, you're basically discussing how ugly their child is. And that's the reality of it, because you've got the founder, you've got the founders, and like you're just basically saying, hey, you thought you had a lovely child. Yeah, well, it's kind of fat and ginger or whatever. And not that I've got anything against ginger people. A bit ginger myself. And so that's a different thing you've kind of got to get working. So my thing is, how do you build it right? Do it on paper. It needs to be cheap and disposable. And you've got to iterate. So at the beginning of the process, you're wrong. I guarantee you're wrong. Yeah, I tell execs you're wrong. They haven't seen our idea. I go, I don't care, it's wrong. And you go through this wrong phase, and on paper, then you start building some tech assets. You might do it in PowerPoint. You just stick images into like a mobile phone screen, for example, and print them out to your clients. You might use tools like Wix or Strikingly to do drag and drop websites or mobile apps that then you've got a bit more fidelity. And then going into wireframing. If you're doing this remotely, obviously there's tools like Miro where you can do Post-it notes. But ultimately for me, the biggest value is me being personally there, a bunch of notes, a look in the eye conversation, a kind of few probing questions of the executive or the founder, and some grounding, and then just get the stuff done in Post-it notes, get the stuff done in Excel. Don't incur any cost. Keep refining this thing you're doing. Once you get a better shape on it, then start using, more prototyping tools until eventually you move to wireframes and kind of rapid iterative builds.
This is excellent. I heard the importance of intentionality behind the prototype, tying it back and, again, elevating it from just a transactional thing. Okay, we understand what they want. Let's build this out and let's try it out. It's bringing consciousness into the process. That's kind of what I heard a lot in between the lines is making sure you're consciously developing the prototype. Let's move on to the final question, which I think is very relevant to the reality of things, right? So you think you've triangulated everything, you've listened, you've gotten the information, you've developed a prototype, and you go out and you are now testing it. How do you go about validating the prototypes, testing them, iterating to fine tune them so that you're solving the original problem? Has it been your experience that sometimes you thought you had it all worked out, but then you go and have new learnings as you bring it out there and validate it? And then how do you incorporate those new learnings? Because sometimes people are like, I just want to get this done. I want to have the project completed, have a deadline, right? But you learn something that would dramatically change the trajectory of what you're offering. And some people ignore that, which is a big mistake. So how do you guys go about that process of like, let's make sure we've got this dialed in correctly as a final stage?
And you've always got to think about what frustrates me in the current, actually, in mostly the previous history of people using frameworks for design thinking and agile, etc., and new ways of working, is they get a bit too religious about it. And for me, I just want an outcome. Yeah. I'm not going to be concerned that I did only 3 of 5 steps of design thinking and then threw it into an agile build and only used half of that in some stand-up meetings. And, people call that fragile and everyone gets upset and blah, blah, blah. I really just need that out. The thing is to do your major learning for free or cheap. And so if you're on paper, people, it is like a birth. I mentioned a baby before, but let's use another example. It's like building a house, yeah. And so if you've just drawn out the plan on the back of a cigarette packet, and someone says to you, hey, that's, well, actually maybe your builder or customer, maybe you're designing for a customer, and the customer looks at your cigarette packet and go, actually that's awful, I don't want it that way, I want these big changes. It's not that much of an issue, and it's not just cost, it's personal investment as well. So the more we go through the different stages of design thinking and innovation and build processes and project management, the more attached and the embedded cost, the kind of sunk costs, I suppose, both personal capital, your brand in the company, your brand as the lead CEO of the company, or just your time, and your reputation, it all starts to add up more. And so, to your point, I think the important thing is to get those really tough decisions and the big changes. I liken it to sculpturing, You get a big rock, beautiful piece of marble. Here I am in Santorini, beautiful Greek islands, and we've been to some amazing acropolis come from Rhodes. And anyway, so you've got a big piece of marble. Better to chip out the big bits quicker, So you get the rough shape. That's the most painful part. And then you have to then keep helping them refine it and using certain tools that are applicable for that stage. And I change them per project. But just think about the outcome. Don't think about the process, the outcome. And everyone's different. So you're essentially dealing with a senior leader. Someone's paying the bill or getting the outcome. Whether in a startup it's founders, or in a bank it might be the head of lending. And then once you've got all the big bits done, and there's that's the easy bit, do that straight away on paper, cheap, no one can complain about cost. And then the rest of it is more negotiation and stroking people's egos to influence them when you're doing the more finer shaping of this beautiful thing you're building. And obviously the customers are helping to shape it. And so that you need different, I suppose the summary would be, you need different speeds in a project. And so don't get all caught up in the process. We must do step 1, 2, 3 this, and then we must do the discovery phase, and then we must move into define, and then we move into develop and deliver. Is be iterative, be conscious of politics and humans and people you work with, and then help shape that into using various different tools until you get something which is going to deliver on all the stakeholders and survives. Because essentially, a lot of the time you start with a great idea and the business just shrinks it and shrinks it and shrinks it and shrinks it. You start with a bright star, and sometimes you end up with a little ball of dirt. If you work in corporate innovation or startup innovation. But anyway,
I mean, you hit the nail on the head so much. It's one of the reasons I love how design thinking has evolved in recent years to make one of its cornerstone empathy, because only through empathy you're able to be adaptable and flexible and not get so caught up on processes. And it's the marriage between these two. It's like a dance, and the really good practitioners know how to do that dance in such a way that it doesn't take away from ultimately delivering on the value, which is about solving people's problems or creating value for people. It's been great to have you as our guest today. Learned a lot. Thanks for sharing all these great insights. Hope people watching don't think of design thinking as this big scary thing. You're probably doing some of these things already. Just, design thinking is just a big umbrella of a lot of smart ways to essentially connect to the people that you're solving the problem for, not just a transaction. And
that's right. I mean, for me, at its core, in our current stage of development where we are, which will change in the future. I mean, this will be how people build apps. The customer will just go, hey, I want my banking app. I want it in blue. You know what things I buy, so give me rewards for that. You know which countries I go to, so give me currency accounts. Build. But until
that's the future of UX.
That is the future, sure. And they build it. But at the moment, the best process we have: talk to the customers, talk to the staff, whatever your personas, understand their needs and wants and pains, and uncover some stuff, and turn that into a successful outcome, which is generally a successful business model. Piece of tech, operations, marketing, etc.
It's amazing when I ask people this question, how much they open up. And you say, if you had a magic wand and you could just wish exactly what you wanted, what would that be? No limitations, no blockages. And people usually come out with something completely different that they've been sharing with you. But anyway, it's been great having you with us. Thank you so much for sharing. Just stay with us as we go off there in just a second. I'm going to ask our producer to announce the shows coming up this week. We have 3 more shows, and they're all design thinking shows this week. Carlos, what do we got coming up? You're on mute.
Yes, I'm not surprised. That's my trademark, and you know it damn well. So, we got a design thinking filled week, and we'll continue tomorrow with Colby Tunick, the CEO of Refocus AI, and Thursday we'll be speaking with Paul Shostak, the CEO of Open World Labs, and finally on Friday we're going to be speaking with Robin Zander, the CEO of Zander Media. So that's what we have for this week. They're all design thinking shows, folks. So join us and join Tulio here on Tech Backstage at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Don't miss it. See you there and then. And thanks, Tulio, and thanks.
Thanks again, guys. See you tomorrow.